Well, welcome everybody. I'm glad you could join us today for our second session, Becca. Even some of you didn't get to attend last time, but it doesn't matter. After the last session, she did send out some documents for you to look at. But this time we wanted to use time to actually kind of bounce ideas off of each other. If you have concerns or challenges with telling your story, it's just a time to share and maybe give other chapters or other people ideas. So, Rebecca, it's all yours.
Thanks, Karen. So many of you joined last month, but if you didn't, my name is Rebecca. I go by Becca Zanata. I have spent my career in the nonprofit space, and I've been consulting for the last 14 years. I have worked with ARCS, was actually one of my donors when I worked at Washington State University. Go Cougs! And got to meet many and spend time with the Seattle chapter of ARCS. So I've gotten to know the organization. I live in Walla Walla now, and I have the opportunity to work with Karen and the chapter support team to put together a training series for everyone. And so what we're hoping to do with the first one was to sort of start a conversation about your story and key messaging and the case. Like, what are you asking for money for? And then this second follow-up session is I would say it's less formal in a way because we're interacting here together. And I've got a series of questions for you that I want to ask how it's going in terms of creating your case. Now, if you were not at the first workshop, it's okay. This is a question and answer conversation. We have an hour together to really talk about what's really most important when we're fundraising is what are we raising money for, right? So the story, what are we telling people we're doing with their gift? How do we go back to them and say thank you? So today's most important conversation is really to talk about the what we're raising money for. Now, the good news is the other thing Karen and I are working on, along with the chapter support team, is we're going to be building a sort of online, I'm calling it the fundraising tool library, right? Because ultimately, you all represent chapters across the country, and we have the national organization, and we have actually. Oh, if I'm going to ask everybody if you aren't talking, if you'll mute, that would be great. And I think I can, but we'll just have everybody mute if you can, if you're not talking. That'll help with feedback and other components. So, um, national case has just come out, which I'm really excited about. I've seen the Oregon case statement, and the Seattle chapter has also shared their case statement. So the hope is that there's information over the next month or two that we'll be able to share with you, no matter what stage you are in developing your story, to be able to share with each other. So with that, I just want to say reflection. So if you were there a month ago, please just tell us what you've been thinking about, maybe what has happened since. I know some people got a group of the board together, some people got some fundraising folks together, but just talk a little bit about from the last session that we had about a month ago. What is it that you have done or reflected on since that time together? And feel free to raise your hand, come off mute. If it's better for you to use the chat, please use the chat.
Well, I'm going to pick on Diana because we talked about this at our board meeting.
So Diana, will you share what you've done?
Um, yes.
There
Um,
is no, there's no right or wrong answer, Diana. So just jump on in.
so I think, we had a conversation at our board meeting about the expectations of our board members. And that is something that we had the expectations toward philanthropy of our board members. And it's really something that we had never really been intentional about. I think we always have left it up to the discretion of our members. And we think that maybe we need to be a little bit more uh, uh, intentional about this. And And so Karen actually developed a really great menu of opportunities, both for board, and now we're also thinking of, maybe not strictly philanthropic, donate money opportunities, but other ways that you can help that we can ask of our scholars. So
Yeah.
it just really opened up this conversation. And I think it's going to be really beneficial to us to really be a little bit more proactive about this rather than just leaving it to the philanthropic tendencies of each individual member. Lots of times, maybe we don't have the capacity to do what we think we need to do to even be counted. And just to show that there are other things that you can do besides give money, or even if you can give $25, it's meaningful,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So I think just having opened that conversation and with Karen's help with these great documents that I'm not sure, Karen, have you shared those documents with these
Not
guys?
yet, but I think, Diana, we're
Yeah,
going to put those in that tool library.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thanks,
So
Diana. So something you said, Diana, I think is really important is, and I've just finished 3 different presentations and at 3 different conferences. And one of the things we're talking about a lot right now is that boards are an extension of whatever staff you have. So if you've had paid staff, volunteer staff, but the board is an extension. And the best place for the board to be is in a storyteller role, sharing and or the impact. And so, one of the things that's been changing, I think, in just board dynamics since I started my career 30 some years ago to now is everybody does something. Not everybody does everything. And so, I think one of the things Diana and Karen and the Oregon chapter are working on is really that where do you and or your board fit into the fundraising conversation? And so part of what we'll talk about over this series of trainings, and we can touch on it today, is really thinking about the fact that there's in a relationship with a donor, there's cultivation, solicitation, and stewardship. And in the cultivation is when we're getting to know donors' values, beliefs, and experiences. So we are taking them on a tour. We are sending them a newsletter. We are inviting them to our event. We're inviting to someone's home to learn about ARCs. But there's different ways, and there's no ask in cultivation. And that's about 60% of our time with a donor. Then in solicitation, it's around 10% of the time, and that's when we're making the ask. So that's when we're asking someone in person, we're asking them at an event, we're asking them via letter, we're asking them via face to face, whatever that might be. But that's when someone knows they're going to be asked for money, right? So it's known, they're ready, we've done our work in cultivation. And then the last 30% is stewardship. And that's where we're sharing the impact. And so that's one of going to be our focus of one of our sessions, probably later in, or either later in 26 or in 27, is talking about stewardship. Because ultimately, that's when we need to go back to people and share what did their gift accomplish. So our scholars achieved what? We served how many scholarships? And so we talk about the art and the science of philanthropy, and we talk about the art being around story and narrative. And so that's the stories of the scholars that you support. Now, I remember being at WSU and learning about the stories of the scholars and being blown away. So that's that narrative part of the story that we're telling. The science part is how much money have we given away? How many scholarships have we given away? Right? It's like it's the science part. And, just think about yourself. Sometimes you want to hear more of the narrative, and sometimes you want to hear more of the science. So, thinking about that, Diane, I'm glad you shared that. And really, ultimately, comes down to the board telling the story. Now, we need to have a story and talking points for them to share. There needs to be some consistency. And so that's what we're hoping to do is to share the national case statement with you and then your own document. And so what I'd love to know if there's anybody else who was there in May who is reflecting on the conversation that they had, or maybe, I don't know, maybe it's a question that you still have. I mean, that's fine too. There is no linear path to getting this done. it's curvy and there's conversations and there's drafts and there's things that we're going to do until we end up with a document. And we actually have put together a shorter version of that case statement outline that I shared with you all in the first session. One of the things we did in kind of a debrief is just talk about what are the most important questions your chapter needs to have in conversation to put your story together. And so we have that document now. I think Sarah's going to share it in the chat. And if not, we'll share it in the follow-up email. But it's one page and it's the key questions to think about as a chapter. So I'll turn it back over to you. What are some of the things that you reflected on or talked about? And, Seattle and Oregon, you have your case statements. They're developing, their work in progress. Talk about yours a little bit. Thanks, Sarah. Sarah Ann put the case statement outline in the chat. Some of you I know cannot download that right now. We'll make sure to follow up with that in an email. Nancy.
Let me see if I'm muted. Can
Nope,
you hear
you're
me?
not. Yeah, we can
Okay.
hear you.
So I've had a couple of thoughts since
Yeah.
the meeting, and I do want to say that since we met, Frances Swenson, who I don't think is on this call, and Lee Doyle made a fantastic presentation to our board about where we are with fundraising this year and
Awesome.
the responsibility that we have as a philanthropic organization. It was just great. It was just at the right level and just the right length, and it was perfect. So, but the things that I've been thinking about are how we can strengthen the credibility of our story.
Okay.
And there are two numbers that we talk about a lot that I just don't feel have the significance that they could. And one of them is they're both cumulative numbers. The fact that we have done 148 million in cumulative funding since our founding, and that we have given 22,576
Wow.
cumulative awards. That just doesn't really, I think, properly reflect our impact. So I have spoken with Carol Stockman, who's an economist, and she is going to take our numbers and come up with a value for our funding that's adjusted for inflation, which we can, I think that will be a much more significant number. And then the other thing is how we can present those awards. And I was working on a grant since we've been together. And I thought, instead of talking about cumulative awards, why don't we talk about total numbers of years of STEM research that we have funded? So I think it's an alternate way to look at it, but I think it might strengthen our story a little bit.
Thanks, Nancy. So something you just said, Nancy, reminded me of a conversation we had in a smaller, the debrief group is with public policy changing and with research funding changing drastically in higher education and many research institutions, ARCS is filling a gap. And actually, the story is, to me, more important than ever to really share the fact that ARCS is stepping into a role where funding is needed and is no longer there in some cases. And so that intentionality and that focus, that is what you do. You don't have to worry about some of the other things, correct? You get to talk about your relationship in higher education, your relationship with the universities that you work with and the scholars you work with. And if you give to ARCS, your gift is going to go towards something that in general is being challenged right now at many different levels. So another thing to really lift up your story. Diana?
Yes, thank you, Nancy. I love where you're going with that. And in some area, I'm not sure where I learned this. This is called social math, right? You make the math relevant to the audience. And I think, we can even think maybe of even better ways of doing that. I mean, it's along the lines of, and this would not be the right way to do it, but it's along the lines of, so if you think about that distance, it's the same as going around the earth 3 times, I mean, make it really relevant to people's experience. So yeah, we just need to think about that. Great idea, Nancy.
Great. I love the way you put that, Diana, that social math. I'm gonna do a little research on that, but I think what we're saying here is taking the story and making it relevant for the audience, right? And so I think there are and there are different ways to do that, and I think it's important to do it in different ways. But ultimately, again, I know from working with Karen and the chapter support team, fundraising is a big umbrella. We're kind of focusing on messaging and story and how to tell it right now. But ultimately, this group here, the 30 some two of you who are here, have an opportunity to learn and share from each other. So I think that's part of this goal of this work together is, hey, you know what? Nancy and the Atlanta team is doing that right now. Okay, I might think about that. And we'll try to figure out. And Nancy, I'm asking you to share that when you guys get that. You can share that with us, and then we can share that beyond to the other chapters as well. Other reflections, things from the session, or let me just ask you this. What's been challenging, and that could be what's been challenging since the session, and you haven't had time, you don't have the right information. What's been challenging? Laura, do you have a thought? I saw you come off mute.
Oh, yeah, I came off mute. I was going to add to the reflection from the last session.
Please, yes, yes.
And I'm fascinated by the story because I think the story is critical. But one of the important messages I took from the last session was the need to be prepared with who you are, what your goals are, how you handle things, transparencies, and the notion of having not only a development plan, but a business plan, if I can call it that. And I had just been to a session with the new UW president, and he was talking very specifically about the importance of having a strategic plan and having that very clear in everybody's mind as the foundation for your fundraising. So I thought that was a really nice and much pause for thought there.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, Laura. I'm glad you shared that. Your strategic plan is a roadmap, right? A roadmap of where you're going as an organization. And within your roadmap are things that are fundable, that you want to fundraise for, that are included in how you're going to show impact, including how you're going to achieve your mission. And so I agree with you. I love that idea of having your own chapter strategic plan, or at least a strategic direction, right? I mean, many times plans can be thrown out the window because the world changes so quickly, but a strategic direction of where we're going and how we think we're going to get there of 18 months to 2 years is a really good place to start. And that includes a few goals and some strategies. And then ultimately fundraising, as you're talking about, Laura, lives within that. The creation of a development plan, the creation of a business plan, but some sort of roadmap that helps you direct so that people know where they can fit in. Laura.
I think I would add to that the other critical important part that often gets left out is looking at it from a formative and summative data perspective. So that you know not only where you're going, but how you're getting along that road. And holding yourself accountable.
Yep. And creating some outcomes, right, Laura, that define the success, right?
Exactly.
So yeah, I think I'm really glad that you brought that up. Planning and fundraising are very much connected. And donors want to know that there's a direction. So what are you trying to accomplish here? Are you trying to serve more students? Are you trying to partner with more universities? Like, what is it, the direction of the organization?
Yeah.
So any other reflections or challenges, things that in storytelling and writing your case, that have been difficult for you and or your chapter. The barriers to having something to be able to share widely.
Well, this is Connie. May I talk for a second?
Please. Yeah, please, Connie, go
Um,
for it.
this is just, I don't know if this is helpful or not, but one of the biases I have about case statements is that it's really helpful to keep them in draft form for as long as you can. And
Yep.
what I could do with every conceivable major gift donor, especially if possible, but
Yep.
certainly a broad-based group of your ARC's leadership, ask them, how can we make this stronger, so that
Yep.
they buy in at that point. I think people love to be asked to advise about why they care.
Yep.
So
You're exactly right, Connie. I mean, I always talk about that. I think a case statement should be in a dynamic form as long as possible. And I think that's what you're saying, right? Is using it as a tool in its draft form to talk to major donors, to talk to others, and to ask their advice. What do you relate to here? What are we not talking about, right?
exactly. In fact, the written brochure, the document, I've never found that donors are that's not where you have the sweet spot with them. It's with what we're talking about right now. Their dynamic interaction with you in ensuring that we're on the same page. Um, in fact, one of the greatest other values of the case statement is that it really allows us to know how best to articulate it in a presentation that is you know, the 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 interaction with the donor, not on paper, but face to face.
Yep. Yep.
And sometimes we struggle with that. So this this is a great discipline.
Yep. Thanks, Connie. And I'll add, we can get wrapped up into what does it look like. I don't care what it looks like. I want it to be really good content, right? And so oftentimes if I'm working with organizations in my consulting practice on campaigns, I'm not worried about it actually looking pretty and slick and gorgeous photos. That could be important, but it needs to look like I still have an opinion if I weigh in here. If you take me like this beautiful document, and I'm going to look around and be like, why do you want my opinion, right? So I think Connie's point of using the document in the format that you have and Word document, a light design in Canva helps you actually tell your story, and then your story can change and develop as you go. Oh, yeah, Jean, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. I apologize in advance. I'm going to have to leave shortly, but I wanted to get back to the point that Nancy brought up about uh, telling the story of our impact. And we've been relying for decades on transactional data. So much money, so many students, so many awards. Those are the things we've done. That's not what we've accomplished.
Great
And I
point.
think when we say that our mission is to advance science in America, what's the data behind that? How have we advanced science in America? Are the students, what's the ratio or what's the difference between the number of students we've funded and the number of PhD students in those departments who would have graduated without our funding? What impact did those awards make? And I think that's a very difficult thing to get at, but I think somewhere we have to develop that story.
Yep. I think you're right. You're asking the right question, right? And those questions. And so, I'm part of it is just I always think about things that we do in these sessions. My hope is that, okay, you're learning and reflecting and also making a note of something that you can then take and have a conversation with somebody else, right? Is it another board member? Is it a fundraising committee member? But then what I hear when I listen to Jean ask that question is, what data are we collecting? What stories are we collecting to show impact with our work? If we're not, what do we need to do differently? Who do we need to talk to? Who do we need to bring into the conversation? And so, I always joke a little. I am an athlete. I have been since I was little, but I always talk about fundraising not being a solo sport. Because the reality is you have to have a team to do it. And if you're doing it by yourself, it's very lonely, especially right now when fundraising at the volunteer level, at the staff level, at the organizational level is challenging. There's a lot going on in our world around us. And so finding a partner, a team to work on it together, so it's not just you in your chapter, but there's several of you addressing it. And the hope is, I think, from the national level, is that we provide some templates and tools that you can use to build out your own chapter tool library for fundraising. Other questions, thoughts about challenging or who's having success? Like, what have you accomplished since? I think part of our goal was that we'd have national case statement and 15 chapter case statements in a dynamic form, right? Not final, that we could share with each other and learn to see examples of how different chapters are talking about science and ARCs.
Well,
Jen,
I
you
can
have
share
thoughts?
from Seattle. This is Jen
Yeah.
from Seattle chapter. Our organization, our chapter has been working on a campaign in honor of our 50th anniversary. So we have a campaign working group that's been meeting and working on our case for quite some time. And then we brought it to our board and in an evolving state, got a lot of great feedback from the board and have continued to let it evolve. And it's just been a really interesting process to see how significantly it has evolved. And I do think that's really helpful because again, people understand more about what we're doing as an organization, I think, as a result of the current case, and I'll share it with you all. It's certainly still evolving as we continue to move ahead into the next year. So it's been a good process.
Thanks, Jen. And I think what you said too about it be evolving and it be different iterations, ultimately you can add whatever fancy language to it, case statement, case for support. Don't get lost in the semantics. Ultimately, it's the story of why people should give to you, right? Because there's lots of choices out there. And ultimately, it also is, as Connie was talking about too, the document for where you can pull event language from, or where you can pull statistics for your website from, where you can pull newsletter language from. So it's a document that is like the story of your chapter and the connection of your chapter to ARCs, and then being able to continually update that and use that for conversations with donors. Other thoughts, reflections, questions? What do you need to be able to take back to your chapter to be able to, in addition to what we've shared, and what you'll see here is Jen just shared the ARCs campaign case statement for Seattle. Thanks, Jen, for putting that in there. Also, and we'll also include it in the email because I know sometimes downloading doesn't work. So we'll include it as a follow-up in the email as well. But what do you need to be able to sit down and tell the story of your chapter as it relates to what are you doing and why should people support you?
Rebecca?
Yes, Connie, and then Connie, Karen, and then Nancy. Connie?
I don't want to speak for anybody else, but one of the things I think the national could do for us that would be incredible would be to contact the alumni.
Okay.
And find out if we don't have to have responses from everyone, how they have used their science education, their great degrees to make a difference. They have some breakthroughs. I would love, of course, to know which of those have come out of the Seattle chapter. But honestly, if we've got a few Nobel laureates out there, and even if we don't, we've got to have some people whose science has really been significant. And if we could have some of those quotes or little vignettes and then a quote from them attached to it, not pages and pages. Plus, honestly, I think some of our best prospects may be out there in our alumni. We don't even know it.
Interesting. Yeah. Thanks, Connie. I'm going to go to Karen and then Nancy and then Diana and then Chris. So, Karen, did you have a thought?
Well, I was just going to say, and what we've all been talking about, we have only been concentrating on transactional data. And so how are we going to get our minds pivoted to what we really need?
Yep. Great question. Nancy?
Let me see. Am I muted?
Nope, you're good.
Okay. So, two things. I'll answer what I think we need, but I'll also comment about examples of how we have impacted science in a very specific way. We have for the Hall of Fame recipients, I think at this point there are probably 15 of them. And those stories have been very well documented. They're available to be downloaded or, viewed on the national website. Those stories have been written, most of them in a pretty understandable, non-scientific way. So I think we already have a beginning of a library of stories that we can tell about a scholar that invented or was part of a team that invented commercial navigation technology that's still in use today. We can talk about a scholar that developed software that is being used on the International Space Station. We can talk about a scholar that invented an entire field of biology. And those stories are, I think they're pretty nicely done. So I'd point to that library of information. And then in terms of what I think I would benefit from having, and I have created my own, but it changes constantly. I would love a compelling story that includes referenceable data about exactly how severely higher education STEM research has been affected by reductions in government spending. That plus the impact of reduced enrollment by international students that are not able to get to the country. Those facts really shore up why there's a serious need for private funding like what we are providing. So I think that story is very relevant today. It may not be relevant, I hope, in a few years. Who knows?
Sure. But right now it is. Yeah.
So that's what I think. I think one thing that I think would be helpful.
Great. Diana, and then Chris, and then Laura.
Oh, thank you. You all know Karen Ogg, right? I mean, Karen is just always on the forefront of all this stuff. And she has had this case statement in our files for at least 2 years. And she has worked tirelessly to get us to the point where we have a case statement and where we all understand the need for something like operations funding, for example. So we're all on board now, right? And we have 140 members in Oregon that could be an army trained to do this work. And yet we haven't done anything. And I maintain it's because we need training. as easy as it sounds to say, well, cultivation is 60% of the time, and
Yeah.
cultivation is just being friendly and la da 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 da.
Yeah.
We were somehow stymied. This is
Yeah.
the thing that is stymieing us. It's that, well, what's a first step? Yeah, and what's a second step? And that sort of thing. And then the other piece is the prospects.
Yeah.
Our audience,
Yep.
how do we identify them? We've done work. We've identified a lot of audience, and I still think that ARC's members are, at least in Oregon, are reticent to go out there, and also have been, I think, concerned about some of the efforts that our new ED has made that make a lot of sense when you look at them. You've opened the door to a wide group of new prospects by just going to somebody and say, hey, we're having a meeting. Would you be willing to donate something? That opens the door, right? But it is upsetting to some of our members that this is happening. And I've had to explain, well, this is just opening the door. It's what everybody does. And it's a thing that we need to train, I think, our members to understand, how to find the prospects, how to open the door. What's the training? How do we do that? So that I think is what I could use help with, that real nuts and bolts. How do you do it?
Yeah. Thanks, Diana. I think, and that goes back to when we can talk about training in different ways. And again, some of this we're not going to do and accomplish right now, but the hope is that this begins to sort of develop these conversations and these trainings develop into something of our own roadmap or plan that National can provide to chapters. So I appreciate you sharing that. Chris, go ahead.
Thank you. And this is such a great conversation. Thank you, Becca, for leading
welcome.
us. And what a value to all the chapters. I want to mention, and it reflects back on what Connie said about value of National in seeking our scholars and getting that kind of information from them, not just the data, but the stories. And so just for those of you who may not be as much in the know right now, we have the Seek and Find effort, which over this next year, we hope to update our database to be able to even contact our scholars. So many of them are among the missing, and we would find how to reach them, where they are, what they're doing, and therefore be able to take at least that first step in knowing much more about our scholar community. And so under Pat Anderson and Carol Stockman, I think that's going to make great strides this next year and help us a great deal. It's just the start, but it's very foundational to everything that we need to do in this effort and others. So that's what I wanted to contribute today.
I appreciate you sharing that. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, fundraising, my first job in fundraising was at WSU, calling alumni and parents and asking for money. And that's when I met people like Connie and others who worked in positions like they got paid. That was their job. And I was like, wow, I could do that. And I never looked back for me. So I spent my whole career, I've been an executive director, development director. I am a board member. And what I would say is it is an ongoing process. And Diana, the training and the learning. And I want to go back to that comment about everybody does something, not everybody does everything, right? Because the reality is, I always say this when I'm working with boards, I don't want to put you in a position where you're not having fun and you're not doing what you want to do, right? And so ultimately, one of the things we do in the beginning is take that cultivation, solicitation, and stewardship exercise. We describe what each one of those is. We put activities under each one for what that means for our chapter. And then what I do, Diana, is I ask the board to fill out what are you most comfortable with, second most comfortable with, and third most comfortable with, so that then I know, either as staff or as a consultant, where I can put you based on where you want to be placed, and to understand that it's all underneath the umbrella of fundraising. And so I think that we can kind of work on some of those things to make sure that everybody does something. Laura?
I guess I would say that we have done that exercise.
Okay. And
still, we just, what's the next thing? We filled out all the forms. We know what we want to do, but then the next thing. Yeah.
So one thing I'll just mention, and we're gonna, Karen, I'm just gonna mention this. I know we had talked about putting it in a follow-up survey, but one of the things that National has offered is some one-on-one time with me, which each of the chapters, to talk with you individually about what it is that you need. Because some chapters at 140 members need one thing, and some chapters at 30 need another thing. And so this could be one of those things that we talk about, Diana, is what to do. Because ultimately, in my head, in my 14 years experience consulting and my 30 some year, we can work on a plan, but I'll also tell you, you just got to do it. And if people don't do it, it doesn't happen, right? That's the other thing, is it is the reality of like sometimes you could talk to your blue in the face, and if you're just not doing the work, money doesn't magically appear. I would love for it to, but that's something, Diana, maybe we can talk about in an individual meeting. So Laura, go ahead.
Oh, okay. A couple things real quick. I want to pop back to what Nancy was talking about with regards to reduced enrollment and international students. So I'm just back from a graduation ceremony with a high school with international students. And I think it's going to back up even further than doctoral students, master's students, bachelor students. When I looked at where those students were headed, very few of them were headed to the States.
Interesting. They were back abroad.
They were headed abroad. Absolutely. And in talking with the counselor, the main reason was funding is too uncertain here. By the time you get to your master's and doctoral program, your program may not be there. Your professor that you want to study under may be somewhere else. So I think there's a strong case to be made for what we're doing is not just the immediacy of now, but we're building for the future.
100%.
That we need to build for the future. And the other part is that what could National do for us and help us with?
Yeah.
I think that ARCS is a fabulous organization that is also one of the least recognized. We know who we are.
Yeah.
But when you talk to people, they're like, ARCS? What's that? I think that getting the word out about just what this organization is, social media wise, could be an amazing tool to help with the conversation starters, rather than having to go back and explain who you are and why nobody knows about you.
Yeah, great point. Great point. Sue and then Chris. Sue, welcome.
Oh, thank you. I'm kind of not in the right place to have my picture, but nice to see everybody anyway. Hey, one of the things, I'm the national treasurer, and so my numbers are my thing.
Sure.
And one of my thoughts that I've been having with relation to Chris's effort to find the scholars is that if we find 10,000 scholars, that is a 10-to-1 ratio to the membership, the national membership of ARCS. That means that if we can get our message to those 10,000 people, that increases our reach tenfold. So I keep looking at this as such a great investment and opportunity. And while it may not be directly related to chapter fundraising with our membership, I think it's a really good way for the chapters to be able to reach the scholars who they have directly impacted, who then have their own networks. So I think that is a huge opportunity for the chapters that's coming up in the next year and a half.
Love that. Yeah, you're right, because that whole group of 10,000 knows who you are and what you do and benefited from it even better, right? So to be able to grow that tenfold with that built-in audience, that's fantastic. And National was working on that, and to be able to offer that would be a great tool. Chris, you took your hand down. Do you have another comment or thought? Okay.
Me, Chris Brent? No.
Okay.
No.
All right. All right.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you, Sue, for the commercial.
Other thoughts, questions. This is a conversation around fundraising, around storytelling, around impact, around tools. I also want to say challenges and success. So again, things that your chapter has done that have been helpful. And I remember Nancy just saying at one point in a meeting, like, we just need some talking points, right? And so maybe just some talking points are a great place to start. And then from talking points, you can build that into a case statement, right? But ultimately, I always think about fundraising in the who, the what, the why, the where, the when, the how, right? Really simple. Who are we? What are we doing? Where are we doing it? How are we doing it? And being able to sort of just walk through those questions and making sure that everybody's on the same page as to what we're about. So other thoughts, reflections, comments, tools that you need, if someone's willing to share a next step that you're going to be working on.
Well, I'm just wondering, real quick, Jackie here from Orange County, California. Could Sue say that again about if we reach 10,000 Scholar alumni and something about tenfold? I didn't quite catch that.
Yeah, go ahead. Sue, do you want to share that again?
Sure. Okay. So we have just a little bit more, I think. Let's see. Let's just put it on my calculator here. We have, according to my records, 1,057 members nationally across the 15 chapters. Okay. Chris's goal is to find about 12,000 Scholar alums and be able to have contact information for them. So even if we find 10,000 of them, that's one Scholar alum for every national member. And one of the things that I find most powerful especially when I was chapter president, I would go to, all sorts of events where our scholars would speak, and they have the stories. And there was a woman who was instrumental in starting our chapter in 1976. Her name was Ann Loudermilk, and she used to say, and it was kind of cringy sometimes, the scholars are our product. Mm-hmm. And despite the fact it was a little weird sometimes when she said that, she was right. They are what we are selling. And so if we have the ability to have our chapters contact all those 10,000 people, they are going to do a fantastic job selling if we can reach them and have them be ambassadors for ARCS.
Jackie, was that helpful? Thumbs up. Yep.
Yes, it was. Thank you.
Okay, you got it. Other things, either successes or challenges, tools.
I just want to say, I think the case outline that you provided is a great structure. So
great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. And I think it is an ongoing learning. And, I think one of the things I've asked a lot of questions of the chapter support team is, how are we in our chapters? So you have a national organization, we have a development person now working with us nationally. Some of your chapters have staff, some of your chapters don't. But where does fundraising live? Right. And that's the other thing I've been asking that I just would ask you to ask yourselves is like, where does fundraising live in your chapter? Who's nurturing it, taking care of it? Is it a person? Is it multiple people? Is it a part-time staff? What does it look like? Because part of I think the battle I face in working in organizations is not wanting to create something that's overwhelming that's no one's going to do because I don't have any staff or I only have one staff. So ultimately, there's lots of solutions and conversations around fundraising, but ultimately our goal is to right size it for your chapter so that it lives somewhere. But then also as an organization, I'm headed to Tucson tomorrow. I'm an Alpha Phi. That's my sorority from college. I'm the chair of our foundation board, and I'm transitioning out of the chair role into a board role. but we're having conversations about, how do we always about succession planning and transition so that we make sure knowledge lives within the organization is passed along. So tools and case statements and documents are helpful, but like where does it live in our organization chapter to be then passed down and through into the future? Because as I always say, as a board member, I'm the steward of the organization right now. I'm leaving in 2 more years. Some of you who are not even here will be the next steward. So how do we pass that along? That's one question I just want to pause for you all to think about is, where does that live? Other thoughts? Got a few more minutes. Kristen, hi, welcome from San Diego.
Hi there. I wasn't able to make it last month, but this is fantastic. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Rebecca, it's really necessary. And I've already heard so many helpful things. I would say ours lives in we have a committee, a fund development committee.
Awesome.
And perhaps many of you here have the same problem, is it's not the most popular committee to want to join. It's kind of difficult because a lot of people are afraid to do fundraising. So any advice from the panel? And also, I'm just curious, does anyone hire staff, any other chapters, and how does that work?
Great questions. So I know Jen is staff. I know Karen, you have staff. I don't know all names here, but I know if you just want to speak to that real quick in terms of staff. Jen, you want to speak to yours
I'm
real
happy
quick?
to. So I've been with ARCS for 7 years. And I started out in a much more part-time capacity, and then have evolved and grown to 0.8 in my role with the organization. But I would say that part of the way that we've always had a staff person. Our chapter, not always, I would say, we have one who's been with us for 35 years, my colleague Jennifer, and they realized at some point they were fundraising, they were raising enough, and membership fees were enough that they needed somebody to help organize, and that's how they ended up hiring Jennifer, and then it continued to evolve, and then hired me as well. So, I think it depends on your budget, it depends on your membership fee structure. So our memberships are fairly substantial and do help cover a significant portion of operations. So that makes a difference.
Thanks, Jen. And then Kristen, I'll add in this fundraising toolkit library, I've started to build an outline, and one of the things we'll put in there are some staff job descriptions, right? Whether it be part-time or 0.8 or whatever, just to start to see what that looks like. Same thing for fundraising committee descriptions. So I would also ask if you have that, Kristen, if you'll share that with Karen, or, because we're gonna at some point ask you all to share different components so we can share amongst each other so we can leverage that. But Karen, I want to ask you real quick about Oregon, but Kristen, I'll just say the fundraising committee, if people understand that it's not all just asking and we can kind of negotiate roles and responsibilities, that's one big hurdle, is just the perception that fundraising is just asking. And if the reality is it's only 10% of the relationship, the other 90% is not, and then we can define what those activities are, there may be an increase in participation. But the reality is people don't want to talk about money, right? And so ultimately, that's just, again, I think it's just a barrier that we sort of have to identify, realize, and then build some tools to bring people more comfortable, but also be under the assumption that probably between now and the end of time, it's going to be the hardest committee to put people on, period. Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Karen? Yeah, of course. Karen?
Yeah, it is.
And then Nancy.
And I chair philanthropy for the Oregon chapter, and I think we have about 10 to 12 people that are on the committee. And so what we did, we divided the committee up into several sections, one for grants, another one identifying major donors, another one for actually going out to visit major donors, And then the fourth one is to develop some salons where we're going to focus on two areas this year. One is planned giving and one on scholar relations, because some of our members are newer. They don't understand our funding for scholars. And so we're going to do these small groups. And we'll also have scholars attend those events because, like everyone says, they're our story. And and they really sell us. So that's what we've done in Oregon. And as far as the grant one, some people will be doing some research on some grants as to whether they'll be able to, whether they'll be interested in ARCS number one. And then another group within that group will actually be writing the grants. And then I was going to say also, we did hire an executive director. I think our first one was 45 years ago. And we actually went to a major foundation, the Murdoch Foundation. And so they actually funded us for 3 years. The first year was 100% of the salary. The second year was 2/3, and the last year was 1/3. And so now what we're doing is we're finding ways to increase those funds so that we can, continue with staff. And we have an admin person as well. So, and we've just hired, Mary Kay, which I think some of you have met already. And she's been fabulous. And I'd say if you find someone, an executive director or another staff member, make sure they respect the volunteers, because that did not happen the first time around. And so you have, we as volunteers, we put these organizations at a certain level and have grown our chapters to a certain level. And you really need someone that appreciates what you've done, ask questions, and will work with you.
Great point. So I'm going to go to Nancy and then I'm going to wrap us up. Oh, you're on mute now, Nancy. You weren't before, but now you are. Now you're not.
I just can't seem to get that right.
You're good. You're good.
So Atlanta has some support just for the Fund Development Committee. And I see that Leslie Petter is in this meeting. Maybe you would want to call on her to make a few comments about how that's working. She worked very closely when she was president of the chapter with this person.
Great. Leslie, do you want to comment kind of on your structure?
I think it has worked exceptionally well. She actually, because she's technically very capable, she does a little bit more than us for fundraising, but actually this is really supplemental to what she does in fundraising because it shows her the other aspects of the organization. Like, for example, when we get all the information from our scholars, she creates the database where they can just input it automatically into a shared drive, and then we can all go access it. So she's fabulous with fundraising, and she works really closely with Nancy putting together the grants. But she's also fabulous in creating sort of a technology framework that the rest of us can access to get the information we need. So it's very, I think it can be hit or miss, whether you find the right person. And we have been incredibly fortunate to find a wonderful person. But I will say along the way, they learn so much about the organization and about processes that we can incorporate that it makes them even better at their primary job, which is fundraising.
Awesome. And Leslie, that's a staff person or a volunteer person?
She's a staff person.
Okay. So I appreciate you sharing that. And we'll, Seattle, Atlanta, and Oregon, make sure we get your staff descriptions into the library. And I start on time and I end on time because I appreciate your volunteers, some of you working, not working, but I will say this is an ongoing conversation. And so we'll follow up with a survey. We'll follow up with these attachments that we shared in the chat. And then I'll also put a plug that our next session is going to be September 16th. And so registration will come out for that soon, but it'll be September 16th. And again, we've tried to make it the 12 to 1 window so that it can kind of meet our Aloha friends and meet our East Coast friends. So 12 to 1. And then it'll be on year-end giving ready, because we know that the biggest, busiest fundraising time of the year ever is October, November, December, and making sure that we have hopefully our story right by then, what we're asking for money for, who are we asking from. So we'll talk about year-end ready, and then there'll be a follow-up session like we did in October. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of the conversation, your questions, your comments, everything. And if there's other things you want us to sort of bring into this conversation, please share it. We would love to. I know Karen wants to hear it. The chapter support team wants to hear it. So please share. So thank you for being here, and have a lovely rest of your day.